His presentation tonight, Meditations on the Theme of Forgiveness, will be an interactive exploration of what it means and the idea of confession. What does it mean in Judaism? How might we approach this year? Please join us and we'll have a great discussion and share together as we continue our series, Welcome to Elul, We Turn Our Souls to the Sacred. Thank you. Rabbi Address, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. Hope all of you can hear me okay. If you can't, just send a message, because it's raining up here in southern New Jersey, and the weather gods, who knows, in Jersey, whatever. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Jean. And I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and for those of you who were with us last Wednesday night with Rabbi Carol. And hopefully will join us again next Wednesday night, same time, same station, for the concluding program with my friend Rabbi Simcha Raphael, who's an expert on Judaism and the afterlife, and we'll be touching on some of that. This will all kind of flow together. And really tonight is a first of, in essence, what is a two-part type of presentation. The second part we'll do Saturday night as we prepare for Slichot services. There's a thing that went out on the Temple Times today. And you'll see there on the Temple Times, it says Slichot service Saturday night, this Saturday night, the 12th, at 8 o'clock. That's wrong. Timeout, hee-haw, illegal use of website. Penalty is 15 brachas, and we're beginning at 7. That's 7 o'clock for the tech study. The service is at 8. And then there'll also be a special surprise Slichot service that hopefully will be up on the website by Saturday night. So that for those of you who are going to join us Saturday night, unless you're going out partying or have an invitation to Mar-a-Lago, 7 o'clock. It's also Frank Sinatra's birthday, so sometime during the day, play an album. For those of you who remember what albums are. And my suggestion is September of My Years, which is one of the great top 25 albums ever made in the history of the human race. So here's what we're going to try and do today. In the next hour, I want to walk you through the beginning of these two concepts in Judaism that are going to meet us on the high holidays. And really, now there are only, what's today, the 9th? So 9 days away from Rosh Hashanah. Those of us who do this every year and are clergy, we already are feeling, and I was thinking about this today in between Zoom stuff, I'm already feeling my body, my thought process, my soul begins to change now. And all of my friends and my colleagues are really feeling the same way. And in many ways, we sort of like become a little bit more inward looking, because we realize what's going to be taking place over the next month. And it's very, very serious, and and potentially very, very powerful. And two of the values that come to us are these values of forgiveness and confession. We're going to talk a little bit more about forgiveness, concept of what it means to forgive and how difficult it is for some people, and why the Jewish concept of forgiveness is a little bit different from some of the Christian concepts of forgiveness. But to lead into that, I want to talk a little bit about the concept of confession and confessional, because it's such a huge part of what we're going to be doing in the next month. And there's a couple of different words, and you're going to be asked this. There will be a quiz in about 5 minutes, so just get ready. Finish dinner, have that sip of wine or Grey Goose or whatever you're into, because I want you mentally to be, ready for the pop quiz. And as opposed to high school, I'm actually warning you about a pop quiz in about 5 minutes. The idea of confessional and a confession. If you go to the great God Google and type in, confession, you're going to get a couple of definitions. One of them being a statement of guilt, and another one is a statement of setting out an essential fact. This is a confession of what I believe in, as opposed to, yes, I'm guilty. I stole that baseball glove. And even in Hebrew, even in Hebrew, there's different words. The idea of the confession is in Hebrew this hoda'ah, which has in it the sense of thanks and gratitude. And the confessional, which we do on Yom Kippur, is the Hebrew word vidui. So when we get to Yom Kippur on the 27th and 28th, and we say we rise for the vidui, which is the Ashamnu and the Al-Chet, which Rabbi Carol went through a little bit last week, that's the Hebrew word. That's the kicker. That's the key word. And there's lots of different confessionals. The most famous of which that some of you may know of is the Shema, which is a confession of faith in the middle of the service, but also those of you who may have had this opportunity, the vidui at the end of life. And there's a confessional at the end of life, which involves someone is dying, which involves the Shema. And many Jews, as their life ebbs, will do a vidui by saying the Shema. So, and there's differences types. In other words, some of you may have people who are friends of yours who are Catholic. Some of you may have started out life being raised in the Catholic Church. Probably every single one of us knows people who are Catholic or were raised Catholic. And this idea of the yes, somebody needs to mute the idea of the confessional and what it means to confess in another type of religion. In other words, so the classic a Catholic interpretation of this is a confession of sin. I confess my sin, and that yields a return to God. In essence, it's to mix metaphors, it's their concept of tshuva, because by I confess, I am saved. And I think I mentioned to this you in one other class before. In one of the books that I use all the time, Daniel Gordis's God Was Not in This Fire, he draws the distinction between Judaism and other religions when he says in much of Christianity, the concept is believe and you'll be saved. Rather in Judaism, it says search and you will find meaning. And it's a very, very different approach to life. So this concept of in Catholicism of I confess and therefore I'm saved, I've returned to God, doesn't mesh with what we do in Judaism. And so at the beginning of the Yom Kippur service, at the beginning of the Kol Nidre service, just about every prayer book and every rabbi has preached on this and every rabbi has taught on this, is this famous midrash which says, for the sins between man and God, Yom Kippur atones. But for sins between people and people, Yom Kippur does not atone. You have to square this with the people that you wronged. And I think we mentioned this at one other class. Social media has become, you're going to see it on social media around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. You're going to see a post on Facebook, which people will put on and saying, if I have wronged anybody in the previous year, forgive me. I ask your forgiveness, and social media has taken the place of a lot of and this year especially when you're probably doing this on Zoom. So the Yom Kippur confession and the idea of sin, because we confess our sins, and as Rabbi Carol mentioned last week, there's two types of vidui prayers: the Ashamnu and the it's always great to look at people as they eat dinner and move around. Every rabbi is going to have a million Zoom stories. It's amazing. I just have to share that with you. It's just, I'm sorry. It's just very funny. You were used to leading services or a class in a synagogue or a classroom and everybody's, maybe they'll have a cup of coffee, but Zoom has changed on that. I mean, people are eating dinner. Yeah. Goldie's drinking. This other guy's drinking. Somebody was eating couscous. Here, Gail, there's a lady walking around there, chanting, sit down already. So it's really very funny. One day we'll just have everybody's going to have Zoom stories. So here's the pop quiz. Rabbi Carol alluded to the concept of sin last week. the idea of the Hebrew word chet, al chet shechatanu, for the sin. And chet etymologically with the Hebrew has the sense of missing the mark, like an arrow, and you miss the mark. When I would teach this concept to religious school kids, I would hold up a pencil and say, here to really reduce it to its basic is the Hebrew concept of sin. You do something, oops, I screwed up. Turn around with the eraser and you erase it. Okay. And the teachers on this call will know exactly what I'm talking about. Do you know what you did wrong? Yeah, I think I know what I did. I know what I did wrong. Okay. So now you know what you did wrong. You erased it and now you won't ever do it again. And that's exactly, to reduce it to its really elementary, dumbed down dumbness. That's exactly what the concept of sin is in Judaism. Notice that you always have the opportunity to make it better. And thus, there's Midrash that tells you that the gates of tshuva, the gates of repentance, are always open, no matter what happens. The idea of being able to come back into a relationship with God is always there, no matter what. No matter what. Now, some of you may be thinking, wait a minute, this is different from some of the traditions in Christianity where we are born innately sinful. Judaism figured this out a long time ago, that if we started to tell you that by the fact that you're born, you're sinful, we're going to lose a lot of people. That's not a Jewish concept. Our concept is really, in essence, more of, and you're going to see this in this week's Torah portion and the Torah Nitzavim, which we'll read again Yom Kippur. It emphasizes this concept of choice. So here's the pop quiz that I want to ask you. All of us are going to be on Zoom or in the live stream, because we're going to be live streaming the holidays, Cantor and I, from the building. And we're going to do the Ashamnu, which is the little confession, the little vidui, and then the Al Chet. And all of you have done this for all of your life. And it's a highlight of the service. And there's profound melodies, and there's ritual that we'll explain when we get to the service and why we do that. So I'm going to ask you, and just unmute yourself if you want to participate. What does this mean to you? I mean, when you've done this in the past, and when you're preparing your souls now to do this in Yom Kippur, when you stand there and do Al Chet Shechatanu and read this litany of sins, what does it mean to you? Are you doing this just pro forma? Okay, it's that part of the service. I have to do this. I'll say the English after they do the Hebrew, and I'll sing along Aviyal Kulam. But does it reach you? When you get to that section, Al Chet Shechatanu, Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, does your soul change? Does it speak to you in any way that you could share? Or this is just pro forma? It's part of the service. I'm here, I'm going to do it. But it doesn't speak to me in my modern, contemporary 21st century life. Anybody? I'm very anxious to hear your opinion.
It really does make you think and take stock of your behavior.
Michelle, in what way?
Just throughout the year, all the little things that you do that you might not think about at the time. And then all of a sudden you realize, taken as a whole, you might need to make some changes,
Have you ever been in a situation where, as a result of that part of the service, you move out of Yom Kippur and say, something, I have the ability to make a change in my life?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a specific example.
No, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I'm just, and you weren't prepared. I didn't tell you last week there's going to be a quiz at 7:15. But these prayers, and when we go through the prayer book on the holidays, I am going to stop every once in a while and try to unpack and explain where these prayers come from and why we do what we do, because most people just don't know, why do we bang our chest? And there's midrash about that. And it's some of it's very, very fascinating. But I'm always
Right.
interested to know because if these prayers in any way touch a person on a very personal level, because you see, in truth, the high holidays, and especially that day of Yom Kippur, it really gives you, it's like a permission to change your life. It's a permission to say, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm involved in a relationship and behavior that I really don't want. It's destructive. I have to get out of this. And as the Torah portion says, it's going to be up to you. There's no magic bullet. There's no God that's going to. It's up to you. This is the power of these prayers. If you actually look at them and unpack them, Goldie.
So the month of Elul is more powerful to me than the services itself.
Wow, tell me why.
For years, I have spent time in the month of Elul reading Jewishly in ways that I don't the rest of the year. And then the service experience is way too many people. The interactions amongst people, we're all happy to see each other,
Right.
but it seems out of context with the significance of the day.
Yes.
So I have a very hard time connecting to the significance of the day. The confessionals make me angry. I didn't do all those things. I don't believe I did all those things. I think it tears me down rather than building me up. And being a better person comes from a kind of self-confidence that the confessionals really tear apart.
It's interesting you say that, because in looking at this stuff for tonight, there's interpretations in Midrash that speak to exactly what you say, Goldie. Because, and I don't ask me to quote the citation right now because it's the end of the day and I've been Zooming since 9:30 this morning, and frankly, my eyes are ready to bug out of my head. And it's dark and it's raining here. It's like, yuck. But one of the quotes that I came, basically asked the same question that you just said, that we say the Al-Chet and the Ashamnu, and no one has committed all these sins. And in fact, in the new prayer books, in Mishkan HaNefesh and the Old Gates of Repentance read, there's a paragraph of new sins. You know, it's not like you did all the other sins, but here's about a page and a half of new stuff that you've also done, which are very, you know, in many ways socially conscious. The climate, you know, despoilation, xenophobia, yep. You know, which is always fun to watch the congregation try to pronounce xenophobia, the old prayer book. But what the commentary said, Goldie, is that, yes, no one in the congregation has committed all these sins. So why are you praying all these sins? Is because some Jew somewhere has committed that particular sin. So in essence, you are in loco parentis, so to mix metaphors again, you're saying this prayer, and by symbolically, you're including all the people who are not there and who may have committed this type of a sin. And in essence, you're praying for them. It's the same concept of when the Midrash talks about, I'm saying this individually, but in a communal way, because the Hebrew is plural. Right. For the sins that we have committed. It doesn't say that I can, because you're doing this concept of community. So, and many rabbis have preached on this and the concept of, and it underscores the community. And it's going to be very interesting this year, because everybody's going to be virtual, no matter what congregation you're aware of. You're either going to be doing it live stream or Zooming, or some colleagues have already, I know a colleague of mine up here has already pre-recorded all of the high holiday services. And all they're going to do is push a button next Friday night, and, you know, it's going to be Erev Rosh Hashanah. I don't know whether he's going to be at a bar or a game, but the services, which is one of the reasons, by the way, that the Cantor and I decided we're not pre-recording all Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur This is a very interesting year. Trust me, this is a really interesting year. So Goldie, that's the answer to, that's the midrashic, the traditional explanation of exactly what you're feeling, because obviously people understood that. People understood that. Anybody else just want to chime in?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes.
What I think about is what I have learned in this faith is that we are as strong as our weakest link.
Explain.
And when one person fails, we all fail. That it's a way that I think of that we're supporting each other. And it reminds me not to become arrogant with myself in that anybody has the potential to fail in some area.
Ah.
That's what I think of in that part of the service.
And gee, so that's why the pencil image is everybody has the power to fail. And in fact, rumor has it that no one's perfect. And it's part of being human. See, one of the if any of you studied Musar, some of you may be in a Musar group or studied Musar. So one of the midot, one of the values in Musar is this concept of anava, and which is humility. And by the way, it comes up in this Torah portion this week. It's a double Torah portion at the end of the year, Nitzavim, and the next one, which introduces the beginning of the end of Moses' life in this double portion. So, Jeannie, this idea that of being human. So, and anyway, but hold that. Thank you very much, because I want to come back on that. I don't want to hold up anybody else wants to say something. Anybody else want to just share their own reflection upon the vidui, the alchet, the confessional, and what happens within your, or whether it's just something that you never really thought about. It's just such a totally foreign concept to 21st century sophisticated American suburban Jewry that you just do it because it's in the service.
No,
Thomas, right?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Are you related to Jenny?
Yes, I am.
But why are you in separate boxes?
We got two computers.
Very
what
sexy.
I like to say is, I mean, the thing that when I think of the Yom Kippur,
Yeah.
you know, the confessional, I've had some experience with 12-step programs. And there's the thing when it comes in and you talk about, you know, they say you make a fearless inventory of yourself, moral inventory, you know, and and what might be different on Yom Kippur is when you make that moral inventory, it is, of course, the bad things, the defects, but it's also good things about
Correct.
it, you know. Then you make that list, like from Rosh Hashanah, you make a list of people that you have harmed, and you become willing to, you know, maybe make the amends, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a joke is, you know, sometimes you have to put them in the three categories, and the three categories are: yes, I can, I will, maybe I will, and no, ain't gonna happen. You know, ain't gonna happen. But the third one is, you know, you go to, says made direct amends whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And I think that's an important part of this time of going there. There are some people I would like to go and make a direct amend, say, look, you know, this argument we had is this argument, disagreement, this falling out. It's stupid, it's whatever. But if the person I'm going to make it to is very abusive, it's going to hurt someone else. It's going to hurt me. So the best I can do sometimes is just to wish them well and let them go. I don't know what Judaism says about that. The only thing I ever heard at the end of life is God kind of asks you that there might be some things nobody's going to forgive you for, and you have to ask God. And God will say, why should I forgive you for this? And the way you do that is you have to forgive others. Anyway,
well,
thank you.
And Thomas, you raise about 19,000 good points. the there is a lot of uh, there is 12-step synchronicity, if that's the right word, in a lot of religious language, and the readings and prayers and explanations around the high holidays really, you're absolutely right. They really do touch that. They really do touch that. There's a passage I was preparing for because I'm teaching Torah study at another congregation Saturday morning that really touches on that as well for this particular Torah portion. But also this idea of what do you hold on to and what do you let go of. I'm going to give you a teaser. That's going to be a Kol Nidre sermon. Because on the theme that I want to talk about this year is conversations with our soul. I'm fascinated by, at this stage of my life, this challenge of what do we hold on to and what do we need for our own health and safety, mental health and physical health. What do we need to let go of? And some people, they just can't let go. And all of us on this call, there's 38 people on this call, every single one of us are going to know somebody, even our part of ourselves, that they just can't, that hurt or that anger or that, it's the Jacob and Esau story. You stole my birthright 20 years ago. I'm never going to forgive you, which goes to what we're going to talk about a little bit more on Slichot. What does it mean to forgive? And what happens when you can't forgive? And what's the psycho-spiritual impact of not being able to forgive? Because a lot of that stuff just sits here. It sits here. And there's this wonderful word I think I used with you once before. It's not translatable into English. It's called jummeling. And it just jummels, it rumbles around in your soul. And it's tough to get rid of. So that's why these prayers, if you really sit on Rosh and Yom and take a look at that prayer book, which hopefully you all have gotten or in one way or the other, and actually look at the English. And those of you who know the Hebrew, sometimes, as you know, the Hebrew and the English don't mesh. But if you really look at some of these readings and some of these translations, they're very profound, and they really speak to what we're going through. And part of that, as Thomas is alluding to, is we have to give ourselves permission to talk about it. We have to give ourselves permission to not be sophisticated and say, oh, well, that's, ancient religion. It has really nothing to do with it. That's all, as they say in the Talmud, kakadudu. This stuff is very, very profound and very serious. And if anybody tells you that it has nothing to do with them, they're a bold-faced liar. It means they just don't have the courage yet to confront their own humanity or lack thereof, or really what it all comes down to, because this is how religion began, their own mortality. Because remember, religion began with human beings' attempt to deal with the uncontrovertible fact that we're all going to die. That's how religion got born. And everything a part of the religion, every religion, comes back to that. And so you'll hear in the liturgy on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, especially Yom Kippur, this is a precursor of death. And why do many colleagues dress in white? Or why will I wear a huge white talit on Yom Kippur and Rosh? Because it's a reminder of the shroud that you're supposed to be buried in, the white shroud. These are all kinds of things, hopefully, that you've been taught that really raise these issues. This is very serious stuff. This is not play stuff. This is very, very serious stuff. So, which is why I wanted to raise this. Now, anybody else before we move on? Once?
Rabbi, I had something. I guess, first of all, what Goldie said, I could have said word for word. So thank you, Goldie, kindred spirits. But I have something I've been working on for a very long time. And every year I'm like, okay, this is the year where I'm going to not do this sin, or I'm going to get rid of this character defect. Next year I'm doing the same thing, and next year the same one, and the same one, and the same one. So I was hoping it would be like a one and done, but it's not that simple. What doesn't make me feel good is that every year I come back on confession and I have this one thing that I don't think I'm getting much better at.
Which is, or you're not going to?
I'm not gonna say.
Okay. But you're thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right? And you know something, Jill, when your soul gets to the point in your life where it matches your body and your mind, because remember, Judaism is a holistic system. It understands there's a basic interconnection between the mind, the body, and the soul. When that connection happens, it'll click. It's like the tumblers clicking, and then you'll just do it. I'm convinced of that. I now tell everybody, my kids included, when they come to say, well, I had to make a decision. I say, listen, this lies. This lies a lot. This never lies. This never lies. Check with your gut. Check with your instinct, because that's probably the best thing to do. Because we call it rationalization. You know, it's like when you sit down with a couple in premarital counseling, and you know that there's something amiss, and one of them turns to you and says, but yes, I know, but you know, we love each other so much, I'm going to be able to change her. And I see everybody shaking their head no. But when you're 25 and you're deeply in like, and you think you can change everything, you know, and we've all been there. We have all been there. Trust me. Well, you know, this stuff is so fascinating to me, and the liturgy and the prayers and the text are so powerful. There's another concept that actually Jeannie alluded to about 10 minutes ago. So is it Jenny or Jeannie? Jenny. Okay. Buddy and Brenda Pollock have a question. Okay, let me see if I can get to the chat room. Buddy and Brenda Pollock, unmute yourself wherever you are.
We're unmuted.
Oh, there you are, with a dog. There's an animal in there. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, my question is this. Would you talk about forgiveness when you know someone's angry with you? This has gone on for a long time. You've asked for forgiveness and they refuse to forgive or even to discuss what the issue is. And it's very hard to move on from that when you've got another party that's just keeping things going and making things very unpleasant. So would you talk about what our text would say in a case like that?
Yeah, sure. Saturday night, we're going to talk about that, but I hate when teachers push it off, so I'm not going to push it off. And actually, Thomas alluded to this. There are some times when the answer is no in life. It's very painful. Probably there's 39 people on this call. I'm going to bet you that many of us have had a situation where we've had a disagreement or a falling out, and you've gone and said to this person, I'm sorry. Let's talk about this. We have to sit down, have a cup of coffee and talk this out because it's really hurting me. We're friends or this. And they say, I can't. What happened was so overwhelming. I can't do that. And it hurts because you know you've done the right thing, but it's not being reciprocated. Sometimes the answer in life is no. It's a very disturbing reality and sometimes, as we used to tell our kids, life isn't fair. And so the tradition basically says this: you have done the right thing. You have crossed the boundary and offered forgiveness. You've offered compassion. Okay? You've confessed. in an ideal world, that's reciprocated. It may not repair the friend. Jacob and Esau were never friends. They never went out to dinner. But they understood that life is too precious to carry this hurt. There are some people who want to carry hurts. There are some people who need to carry hurts. It's their identity. It's very sad. Sometimes people outgrow that. Sometimes they don't. But you, as the initiator, have done the mitzvah. And so consequently, the tradition says you cannot change another human being. And that person's reaction may be based upon so many different things. And you may be symbolic of somebody or something that you're not even aware of. And then you just have to move on. And you hope that in the future, some sense of reconciliation can come. It goes back to what Thomas was alluding to, the holding on and letting. Sometimes you have to let go of a relationship for your own health. Because if not, you get sick.
Rabbi?
And they're actually, in the workshop that I do for my Jewish sacred aging work, maybe one day we'll do it for you guys on new rituals for new life stages. It's all part of my Jewish sacred aging stuff. But we've actually uncovered and have prayers. Somebody sent me once a Kaddish for a parent who was abusive. And, which is very hard. I mean, to read this and say, it's like, but this is real. I mean, this is my former associate director when I ran the Department of Jewish Family Concerns, actually, I think uncovered a ritual for a child who was a victim of abuse. And a prayer for, these things are happening because people will use ritual and prayer for a way of letting go. And that's one of the primary reasons for rituals. Okay. If we get to that part later on, I want to raise that. One of the things that happens value-wise, because I have to start speeding. First of all, thank you for your honesty and being willing to talk about this. It's because this is really part of the learning process. One of the major values that comes up in this concept of the holidays is something in the Hebrew called cheshbon hanefesh. Cheshbon hanefesh, which in usual translation is an accounting of the soul. In modern, how many of you have been to Israel? Just wave your hand or foot or throw something at the screen. Okay, so when you go in to get a cup of coffee in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv or wherever you have the not on the tour, but by yourself or with your buddy, and you get to the the bill, and you raise your hand, and the Meltzar, the server, comes over and says, if you want anything else, you say, no, cheshbon bevakasha, which means, give me the bill. Cheshbon is a bill. The cheshbon hanefesh is a technical term that I'm watching a cat destroy this guy, Mr. Hood. I don't know whether you can see it. It's a nice fur hat. When the wintertime, you can put it on and you'll be happy in the snow. The idea of the cheshbon hanefesh ties in with Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. This is a time, because all of you who spoke have that's what you were saying. This is a time that I have to take an accounting of who I am. There's a passage in a book by Tom Cole called No Old Man Country, where he interviewed about 2 or 3 dozen men over the age of 80, just over the age of 80, and asked them what it was like to reflect upon a life now that they've reached the age of 80 and what they're looking forward to. And in one of the interviews, he quotes this passage from another rabbi, Sam Karf, who just tragically last month passed away, who said that living our life is, quote, listen to this, it's a great quote, the price we pay for being flesh and blood human beings. The price we pay for being flesh and blood human beings. That's what life is. And to go to what, what the Pollocks are talking about, what other people do, there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees. All of us know there are no guarantees in life. None at all. And so the pain and the suffering and the heartache, as well as the joy, that's the price we pay for being human beings. And so this period that we're entering into really is about taking an account and accounting. So when Goldie is talking about Elul being this more important in any way sitting at a service, that's part of what she's talking about. It's part of, this is the time I'm taking stock of my life. I'm giving an accounting of my soul. And that's part of what's going into. So part of the goal of the holidays, when you even online, even virtually, even live streaming, is that to perhaps do that. The guy who created Cheshbon HaNefesh, which was a Rabbi Menachem Mendel Leffin in the Middle Ages, he started this practice. So this practice has been around for centuries, by actually taking a journal and writing down the accounting of his soul. And, many people journal. Some of you may journal. And it would be an interesting practice to perhaps during these 10 days that are coming up, to take that journal and just write down just some of the things that make up the accounting of your soul, the things that give you joy, the things that are concerning to you, the pain, the pleasure, the joy, the heartache. And like Jill was alluding to, and coming out of that, what do you want? What do you want going forward in this new year? Because it starts out brand new. The Vidui, as we said, this long and short Vidui, actually came into formality within Judaism in the prayer book of Rav Amram in the 9th century. According to classic Jewish scholarship, the first organized Jewish prayer book dates from the 800s, the 9th century, by a gentleman by the name of Rav Amram. And the Vidui, as it appeared even in that prayer book, has continued up to this day. So when we go through this during the holidays, you're dealing with a piece of literature and liturgy that's hundreds and hundreds of years old. But I want to read you something from probably the leading liturgist in the American Jewish community, Dr. Larry Hoffman, who's a professor at the Hebrew Union College in New York. He's literally the expert on Jewish liturgy. He's also my doctoral advisor. He's a super and brilliant beyond get. If you ever have a chance to hear him, you should. He will blow you away. He was one of these professors that in one of the classes for my doctorate, he was giving a lecture on Jewish philosophy and liturgy. And I actually sitting in class and put my pen down and said what the poetry that he was speaking in such wonderful, beautiful terms that I figured if I took notes, I was going to miss half the beauty of what he was saying. I don't know whether you ever had a professor like that, but I'll never forget this. It's like 25 years ago. He was brilliant, but he writes on the Vidui, listen to this, because it does speak to some of the differences between Judaism and Christianity. He writes, but do Jews really believe we are as sinful as the confessions imply? And this goes also to what Goldie was talking about. 19th century Jews recently emancipated from medieval ghettos doubted it. If you now think back to the class we did about the Reform Judaism in July and the first class when we talked about this. For well more than a century, philosophers had preached the primacy of reason as the cognitive capacity that makes all human beings equal. These two influences, political equality and the fresh air of reason, paved the way for a century when all things seemed possible. And indeed, scientific advances and the Industrial Revolution did seem to promise an end to human suffering just around the corner. We seem to be, this may sound familiar. It wasn't just Jews who felt that way. For Europeans in general, the notion of human sin, whether original for Christians or primal for Jews, lost all plausibility. Far from bemoaning human depravity, it seemed religion should celebrate human nobility. Enlightenment rabbis began paring away Yom Kippur's heavy accent on sin. That's what the original Reformed Jews in the early 1800s in Germany started. That's why they chopped so much of the prayer book back. And then if some of the early Reformed Jews in the early 1800s in Germany would take a look at the prayer book that we will be using next week, they would just go Schrei Gewalt, or at least do it in German, because they say, my God, we worked hard to get rid of all this. And here it's back. What are you doing in America? And that's part of the challenge. Hoffman writes, from then until now, new liturgies, usually Reform and Reconstructionists, have shortened the confessions, translated them to lessen their overall impact, and created new ones that address more obvious shortcomings. You'll see that in this week in the prayer book. But traditionalist liturgies, too, try to underscore human promise and explain away the aspects of the confessions that no one believed anymore. Al-Chet is an enumeration of all the sins and errors known to mankind, said Samson Raphael Hirsch, the founder of modern Orthodoxy. It is not as if we personally have done them, Goldie, but some Jew somewhere has, and as the Talmud says, quote, all Israelites are responsible for one another. So that's Hoffman's take on this. And it's really, again, historically, that's why all this stuff is historical. Nothing ever happens in a vacuum. One of the things about the high holidays and the confessionals and sin is this idea of where it comes from and how to get rid of it. Now, the confessionals say if you pray, that's one way you confess your sins. Oh, when this is the big close. And the midrash that I started with about the sins between man and God, okay, but person to person, no, you have to square that. But Judaism, obviously, throughout its history, has been very, very invested on how do you get rid of sin. Okay. That leads to this whole understanding of the development of rites and rituals, some of which we still do, that are engaged and developed in order to get rid of sin. For those of you who know your Bible, your Torah, there are these rituals in the Torah. The scapegoat in the book of Numbers, I think it's Numbers, at the high priest, and lets the goat expelled from the community, symbolically getting away from sin. So here's a quote from a more scholarly article dealing with some of this. And he's quoting a whole series of texts. Repentance is likened to a door, which if a man opens only as much as the eye of a needle, God opens as wide as a gateway. For those who so are willing to cleanse himself is assisted from God. And confessions may be said to be the opening wedge or the hinge on which repentance turns. Okay? And there's a very classic theology involved in the Al-Chet and the Ashamnu, as if there is a God listening. And so for people in the modern world who do not accept the belief in a supernatural God, one of the theological challenges is always, well, how do I say this and who am I praying to? Who's listening if not me? And the reality is, it is you who is listening. Okay? The Israelites created lots of different types of rituals and superstitions, one of which, Tashlich. Okay? Rosh Hashanah afternoon, usually, in most communities, and the Reform movement has brought this back in droves, because when I was growing up at KI in Elkins Park, which was a classical Reform congregation, if I had walked up to Dr. Korn and said, "What time is Tashlich?" he would have said, "You're in the wrong synagogue. The conservative Orthodox shul is down the street." Okay. Now, Tashlich, what is Tashlich? You go to flowing water and you take bread and you throw it in the water. This is based upon a passage from Micah, because the rabbis interpreted all these biblical passages. And symbolically, you're taking your sins and you're throwing them away. You're throwing them away in flowing water. Water, another metaphor for cleansing and purification. We talked a little bit about this in one of the Torah study things. There's a whole class just on the impact of water. The mikveh. Why is the mikveh all of a sudden becoming something that Jews are flocking to? Cities are building more mikveh, mikvot. Younger people who are not only getting married, but who've come through cancer treatments or come through difficult periods of their time, or just feeling that they need to be cleansed and renewed, go to the mikveh. Water has a cleansing, it's a cleansing, purifying, where for conversion. Mikveh, water through all religious traditions, the baptism, same thing. It's common to all these religions. How many of you, and the removal of sin is part and parcel of this thing, okay? How many of you shlug kapora? Have any of Felice? Felice has thrown a chicken. She got a chicken, and she took the chicken, and she went out and she threw the chicken around her head, and woof, purified and clean. Felice, when did you shlug kapora?
Well, it wasn't exactly. My dear friends who live a few doors down invited me for Rosh Hashanah, and they slug kapora with a plastic chicken so we could all participate. And it was
plastic chicken?
Yep.
God bless you. Look, to modern Jews, the idea of going outside and taking a chicken, real or plastic, throwing it around your head and saying a blessing to get rid of sins sounds medieval and superstitious. But you have to remember, just take your rational scientific kippah, put it over there. Superstition is part of every religion. And it's also part of every single one of us. Every single one of us have superstitions. We have rituals that we do that we may not admit in public, but we have little shtichlach that we do, okay? And we don't have time to go into all of them, but I'm sure if all of us were, anonymously writing out your little rituals or superstitions, that would be very, very interesting. But the idea of the tashlich, which will be where the Cantor is doing tashlich, we're putting it online. So if you want to do something, instead of all of us meeting but down by the river, you'll be able to do this symbolically or with the Cantor and a couple of the teenagers online. The custom, I got to hurry up. The custom developed around the 13th century. So the tashlich is quite old. And initially, listen to this, the rabbis in the medieval world cautioned people not to do this because they were concerned that this would lead to a perversion of the true religion if everybody started to do all this superstition stuff. And again, this is an article from one of the other websites, My Jewish Learning. It's very, very interesting. Although the rabbis preferred that tashlich be done at a body of water containing fish, another ritually symbolic food, think Jonah and the whale, Yom Kippur afternoon. Any body of water will do as long as it is running. And just for the fun of it, If we have a couple of minutes. I know we're supposed to end at 8. Oh, there it is. You should see my study. It's right before the holidays, which means there's books lying all over the place, papers lying all over the place. So there are actual collections of superstitions, some of which you may know of, and some of which are assigned to other parts. So I'm going to just read. This is from one of the books that all rabbis, these anthology things. But the superstition things are very, very funny. And actually, here's another book that I pulled out of my library. I did a couple of services once. Maybe we'll do this. Called Jewish Magic and Superstition by Rabbi Trachtenberg. This is a book that's out of print. But in here, if you have something happening in your house and you think a dibik, which is an evil spirit, is inhabiting your house, this book will tell you how to exorcise that spirit. Right here. We don't have the time to read it for you, but right here, it just says how to do it.
Is that Jewish literature?
What?
Is that Jewish literature?
Yes, this is a book called Jewish Magic and Superstition. Here it is. It's out of print. I have a copy. It's great. And one day we should do a service. I did a couple of in my pulpit. We did a Friday night where we just went through a lot of these superstitions. It's funny. Here's a couple because I want to be respectful of your time. The evil eye. How many of you do a kinahara? Okay, what's a kinahara? An ayin. It's an eye. Hara, evil. The Yiddish. It's the Yiddish of the evil eye. That means the evil. Do you really think there's an evil eye hanging over like someplace? I mean, it hangs over the Phillies bullpen, but in real world, but no. Everybody, we've all done this. Don't give yourself a kinahara. Are you serious? Are you serious? The evil eye, to throw off the evil eye. Some of you may know people who've done this. Spit 3 times on your fingertips, and each time make a quick movement with your hand in the air. Anybody know anybody who's ever done anything like this? Because I do, okay? If the eye itches, you'll rejoice. If the left eye itches, you will cry. Preserving stones were worn by pregnant women to prevent miscarriage. Numbers and letters with assigned mystical powers alleviated illness. Hand and finger gestures were related to protective forces of sex, Freudian slip. Sickness in general was caused by demons. Okay? This is Judaism. This is not some far off religion. This is part of our mystical tradition. Marriage. Oh, holidays. This is for Felice. The custom of kapora, swinging fowl over the head, was believed to be a vicarious release from sin. Casting bread on moving bodies of water, tashlich, was symbolic of man's sins being washed away. Marriage. Some of you may have done this. Circuits around the groom or bridal couple symbolically create a magic circle, protecting the bridal couple from evil spirits. Veiling of brides conceals her identity and deters harmful spirits. Sisters should not marry on the same day lest their parents incur the evil eye. Breaking a glass at the wedding ceremony was to frighten away evil spirits. It was considered an ill omen to be married during the month of May. Hence, marriages in the tradition were forbidden during the counting of the Omer, except at Lag BaOmer, where you could do this. This is just a sampling. In conclusion, we're entering this unbelievable period of time. The idea of the vidui, the alchet, the ashamnu, it's rooted in history. The idea, as you've expressed, what it means to you to stand and do those prayers. The cheshbon hanefesh concept of the giving an accounting of one's soul. And some of the customs like tashlich and kapora, the evil eye, rooted all to get rid of sin, still rooted in our mystical medieval tradition that many of us, as you just shook your head, many of us still do, me included. Me included. I do the Kanahara as a lot. A lot hasn't helped, by the way. But you never know. You never know. It's 8:01. Listen, thank you very much. Let me just see the chat. Anybody have any last minute questions real fast?
Just
Next Wednesday, Rabbi Raphael, Simcha Raphael, will be talking of some of the mystical aspects of Yisker and afterlife, because he's the expert on that. Jill, thank you. Jean, thank you for the tech. Everybody, listen, stay safe. And I hope, God willing, next Wednesday night, I'll be at some place called the Residence Inn off of Butler Boulevard, wherever the hell that is. And hopefully there's a Publix nearby that we can go grab dinner. And Jill, if I'm late next Wednesday night, it's only because of the flights and we'll be transporting, but
Okay.
I'll let you know. Stay safe, everybody. Thank you very, very
Thank
much for
you,
your
Rabbi.
participation. This was great. You taught
Thank
a
you,
lot.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Jean, you gonna keep this open for a little bit?
I'll keep it open. I also would like to remind people that this Sunday, they'll have an opportunity to pick up the High Holiday prayer books between 10 and noon in front of the temple.
Yeah. Thank you, Rabbi. That was fantastic.
My pleasure. Slichot, 7 o'clock. Remember, 7 Saturday night. 7, not 8.
7.
Rabbi.
Rock and roll. Take care, guys.
Rabbi.
Bye-bye.
Rabbi.
You, Rabbi. Thank you, Jill.
you.
Thank you, Jill.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Good job.
Jean, Mary Ellen did a great job getting information out about the series and about reminding everybody each time about the specific lecture. So she's been terrific.